This launch is we're very excited for this launch, firstly, because it is a wonderful chance to have a chat with some absolutely brilliant people in the ecosystem. We have Kylie Little, the director of KPMG High Growth Ventures, Malcolm Thornton, the director of Impact Capital from the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, and also Jada Anderson, who is a co-founder of Xylo Systems, on the call, alongside our Climate Salads fearless co-founder Mick Lebinskis, here to chat through some of the data. But first, I would love to pass over to Liza Noonan from our wonderful partner at Tech Central. They are an incredible supporter of all things climate tech, and we're very grateful for their partnership. So thanks, Liza.
Thanks, Olivia, and Budieri Kamaru, hello. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the first innovators, scientists and custodians of the lands we're on today. I'm joining today's session from Camaragal country, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to First Nations people joining today from wherever you may be. As Olivia mentioned, my name is Liza Noonan, and I'm the Executive Director of Tech Central and Innovation Districts at the Greater Cities Commission. So many of the startups, scientists and investors who call Tech Central home are also proud members of Climate Salad, an ecosystem that demonstrates how impactful you can be when bringing together innovation, technology, and people who like to get stuff done. Tech Central is just over 1.5 kilometres from the Sydney CBD, the centre of the Sydney CBD, and includes neighbourhoods of Surrey Hills, Camperdown, Ultimo, and Everleigh. It's where you'll find some of Australia's largest technology businesses, thriving startups, creative minds, and global leaders in education and research. Tech Central is united by a culture of really purpose-driven people who want to make this world a better place. And to do so, understand the importance of coming together across disciplines, sectors, and lived experiences to really accelerate change. Tech Central's community are also deeply committed to preserve and improve the rich natural environment us Sydney-siders and Australians get to experience every day. It's why Tech Central is so pleased to support Climate Salad in this important report that surfaces the wealth of talent, ideas, tools and passion available in the Australian climate tech industry, paving the way towards a much more sustainable and resilient world. We should be really bold in accelerating our collaborative efforts across government, industry and research to support Australian climate tech businesses scale and attain global leadership. After all, it's not only the right thing to do, it's a massive global opportunity. At Tech Central, we really look forward to promoting this industry report and, as a community, the practical recommendations it makes. Thanks again, Climate Salad team, for all that you're doing to amplify Australian climate tech, and we're really looking forward to today's conversation. Thanks, Olivia.
Wonderful. Thank you, Liza. And I think now we'll pass over to Mick Lebinskis for a little bit of a deep dive into the data before we pass on to the group discussion.
Thank you. Thanks, Olivia. Am I sharing my screen, or is Alison going to share screen?
I'm happy to share my screen also.
Yeah, if you can share, that'd be great. Hey everyone, go Matildas. Very excited to be with you today. Massive thanks to Liza and the team. So good to see such great activity at national and global levels, but I think really critical to know that creating spaces for people to come together to build this industry and build these solutions is really, really important. And Tech Central, huge supporters of our festival last year and the industry report, so greatly appreciated. And also awesome to have such a great group of people here chatting. Thanks everyone for coming along. Jump through and Liza's done. Thank you. Just a quick shout out to the amazing ecosystem we have here. It's going to take a real village to build all these solutions we need, and that's coming together more and more and more, and everyone is part of that. A big part of our focus is obviously on the companies. Next slide. Yeah. Just a reminder of our vision. So I totally and utterly believe that Australia can and should play a massive role globally in solving these problems. Our three mottos that drive us are build for impact, work for founders, and design for diversity. They're the lens by which we put on all the things we focus on. And we have two big missions. One is to grow a big industry because we need lots of shots on goal, go Matildas. And secondly, we need some of those to be wonderfully outsized, crazy successes. So when we say 10 global successes there, we're talking like Canva level climate tech successes. So next slide. Go the report. I'm just going to really jump through some highlights here and then open up to some of this discussion around some of these big areas. So 228 companies. Again, they're the important people here. So thank you for them taking the time to give us share their journeys and their progress. A massive thanks to them and keep supporting them. Next slide. Sectors. So lots of breadth here. There's no single focus. That's could be good, could be bad in terms of finding the one thing we want to drill into. My view is it's such a broad opportunity and it covers so many different parts, and Australia has such capability. I don't think there's a desperate need to do that. Clearly, we've got some strengths in ag and food, circular economy, data and finance, but absolutely growing strength around energy, thinking about renewable storage and resources as well. So lots of places to apply our incredible strengths and abilities. The report goes through individual sectors, and I think it's really valuable to jump into those and look at the commentary from the industry experts, but look at how do those sectors differ? Where are the strengths? Where are the gaps? Where is the biggest opportunity for support? And just encourage everyone to go that level deeper in looking at the report. Stages and sectors is really important. We define that in the various parts of the journey of these companies. We know that that we need to develop research. We know that we've already got some amazing products at scale, and a lot of companies get highly challenged in between, and they're quite spread. So I think each of the different sectors have a different journey actually based on capital requirements, customer opportunities, etc. So I think understanding and appreciate that is really key. A big thank you for our partners and supporters for the report. A number of them here today, so thank you. And great to see so many good industry organisations, tech companies, climate-focused investors, and also climate tech companies jumping in to actually really play a material role in helping get this out. Some key takeaways that we feel are worth highlighting, and I'll just cover these off again. Encourage you to read the detail of the report. Firstly is globally very ambitious. So this has been a big part of our focus for helping these companies. We know that it's a global problem, and Australia sometimes is challenged by taking these companies global because of that we're a small market far away. But we at least we've got really, really strong ambition, and it is quite spread. We know Europe is more advanced in some ways, but we know there's a strong path to the US, but also proximity towards Southeast Asia and Asia. Jobs, really great to see so many jobs already in this space. And we know that's going to continue. The jobs are spread. There are good regional jobs. You look at sort of Newcastle and Gladstone as good examples, spread across different industries, different growth rates. And obviously, once they hit scale, they get to a more serious size. I do think there are opportunities to sell globally and build the team locally, and we want to keep doing that. Impact measurement. So this is a really interesting one that is both really important, really complex, and in some ways frustrating. The fact that we know how to manage money to the nth degree, but we don't know how to manage the value of the environment. Probably part of the reason why we own this predicament. But it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing for these companies because they need to set big goals, but they may not fully be able to measure them with detail. But also that might be the solution they're trying to build is measurement. So there's a real industry building component to the impact measurement challenge. Diversity. So we're really strong, I think, in one of the strongest industries around gender, which is really good. 44% of the companies with a female founder. Kind of keep working on that to get it up. But we are reasonably good. Next slide around the international background of the investors. Next slide. And in terms of their multicultural background, definitely, I think to Liza's point, I think there's a lot we can learn from Indigenous and First Nations people in terms of building sustainably with the environment. So there's definitely a couple of areas to work on in terms of diversity. And then capital, final big one. Obviously, we want people to get lots of customers, but we know that there's capital intensive businesses here, so they need some to they'll need some to grow to their full extent. Despite it being a lull, we actually raised more capital in higher amounts. That it was a little bit more concentrated in less deals, and we know there's more funds becoming available. So that's really positive, but there is definitely a big need for capital into this space. So $1.5 billion is the amount we want to raise. Obviously, may not get all of that, but that's definitely the goal. And beautiful Sankey here showing that 35% of the capital came in from overseas. That's increasing. I think that's really important for a few things. Number one, it pushes the Australian investors to be a bit bolder, but also just increases the capital available for these companies to invest. It's a big part of the reason why we run our trade missions around the world. So, yeah. So the other thing around capital, I think, which is really important to note, is having a framework and being direct versus indirect can really influence your ability to raise capital. So I think awareness of that is something that, as an impact organisation, is becoming really interesting to think about. So, yeah, a lot of key data, and again, encourage you all to jump into the full report and go through it. Okay, so what we wanted to do was to bring on a crew of people with some really different perspectives into this space, with a particular focus on, now we've got a strong industry, we've got a lot of companies growing. How do we actually get the companies and the industry to start scaling? Like, what things can we do to really be like do that capacity building and actually make a big difference? So we brought on a crew of people here to bring in some different perspectives. We've got Kylie, who is the director of KPMG's High Growth Ventures, been a founder herself, and has been one of our biggest supporters over the last year in helping really invest and grow this ecosystem. So great to have you, Kylie. Jada from Xylo Systems, CTO and co-founder. Xylo is one of the companies actually building solutions to solve these problems and making great progress. And Malcolm Thornton, director of Impact Capital at CEFC, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. Malcolm's been a venture investor for many years and is applying the combination of that capital into impact there. So, team, thank you very much for coming together. I'll just quickly first of all, to make sure that we are highly encouraged just to directly interact, so I can save my voice for the next Matildas game, and also to allow you all to make it a really vocal conversation. But the thing I wanted to drill into is, we know it's a big problem. The climate is a really, really big problem. We know there's capital available. We know we've got companies at different stages in that journey. I wanted to throw it first to you, Jada, in terms of this capital into climate. Where are we in terms of that maturity? Is there enough people that genuinely understand climate to be able to invest in it? Yeah, how have you found someone who's deep within the building solutions versus actually trying to convince these investors to invest in this space?
Huge question. So first of all, thank you for having me. Lovely to be here. I'm on Camaragal country and I'm really enjoying the context for this discussion. But I guess to dive straight into the question, is there enough capital to invest in these solutions? Absolutely not. I think the growth that we're seeing on the founder side of things, in terms of the, particularly if you see in the report, the growth in the last 3 years we've had in climate tech has been phenomenal, and the capital is just not meeting that demand. So that's kind of the first thing. But I think also, as we see maturity in climate tech more generally, the actual breadth and depth of solutions that we're coming up with now in terms of all those different sectors that address climate change is widening, day by day. And it means that we need more investors who are capable of investing in those new niches within climate tech. So just speaking from personal experience, Xylo Systems is sort of, it sits under the biosphere category. And although nature-based solutions are sort of now well recognized as a huge contributor to solving climate change, we would, go to climate change investors, or, more specifically climate tech investors, and we wouldn't fit under their their thesis for what they would invest in, purely because it's not well known or well recognized amongst investors yet. So we need more breadth and depth in terms of understanding of all the different solutions that sit within climate tech, but also actually more capital as well, because we need capital quickly so that we can grow quickly. And this is a time sensitive problem that we're all trying to solve here. So I think it's a really huge problem.
Yeah, thanks, Jada. Malcolm, I want to bring you in on this. Can you tell us a bit about in terms of CFC? It's a government-supported organisation, and its partly goal is to try to bridge that gap of like the industry should be building and supporting this, but we're not quite there yet. It's highly capital intensive. How do you can you tell us a bit about why that's important to do, and where are we in terms of bridging that gap?
Yeah, Mick, likewise, thanks for the opportunity to be here. Good to join the esteemed panel and celebrate the launch of the second report. Awesome to be supportive. So CFC is, it's fully government backed actually. So we're 10 years in. We've had a good run on funding the larger end of town in terms of generation, large scale solar, large scale wind. We've had our innovation fund in the market, for probably 6 years, supporting I think 27 companies at last count. But that's only 27 companies, and if you look across your report, you realise it's a drop in a bucket, drop in the ocean, really. So how do we then go beyond the work that we've done to date? And I guess the good news is with the change of government last year, we've seen a couple of new programs flowing through. What's recently landed with CFC is the Powering Australia Technology Fund. So it's a $500 million boost, to our balance sheet and resources that we're now busily lining up the strategies to where are the needs, where are the investments that we can make, both directly into companies, into projects, and into funds, where we can support a number of stages, not just the very, very early stage, and not just that large scale, sort of at scale in town, but everything in between. And that's the piece where we're sort of exercising our minds pretty rigorously, because it's time sensitive, as Jada said, we're all aware of. But we also operate on a return on capital model, as all investors are, if you class yourself as investors. So how do we put our risk sort of model around that? How do we look at a future that supports future funding rounds, and ultimately customers to generate that great non-dilutive capital, being revenue, and then ultimately we are a very patient investor. We're a balance sheet investor, and very fortunate to have that sort of timescales which stretch potentially beyond the life cycles of funds. But ultimately, it's returnable capital. So what does it look like, in that 5, 10, 15 year time frame, to return capital, not just to ourselves, but to the people we invest alongside. So one of our key roles is to act as that catalytic lead, where organisations are trying to get their mind around, is this a space, is this a stage, is it a sector? Can we do diligence, which helps? Can we leverage that 10 years of experience to encourage other investors to invest alongside us? So one of our primary KPIs is investing alongside others. We call it leverage, but not in the sense of debt, but more like co-investment, but not in the sense of paying someone else to manage. So for us, there's a variety of topics, but it's good news at the minute that we've sort of been given a fresh pump of air into the tires, and we need to think about how we deploy that in as rapid a time frame as possible.
Right, Kylie, I think there's a bit of a question around, are we investing in these companies because we should, even though they're maybe not really ready for scale? Is it still a bit of philanthropy and we need to actually work on the companies just to be great businesses? Or are they, I think there's a bit to Jamie's question is, are they actually really good companies, but the investors don't quite get climate yet? In terms of where you sit between the high growth ventures, how are you seeing it?
So because I guess we sit on the side where our role is that we support founders and startups with a service offering. And we've done a lot of work really understanding what is different in this space versus the sort of the wider portfolio of companies we work with. And there are a million differences. You've got a much more complex set of organizations with much more complex solutions they're developing. There's more hardware, there's more science, everything's just harder. There's nothing sort of simple or streamlined about it. And I think one of the things that we've really have come to understand is a lot of the founders we talk to are talking to us about when they go out to raise, how they're struggling to raise. There's probably not enough people out there really working with climate techs. A lot of traditional VC are saying it's not really for us, it doesn't fit our model, it doesn't make sense for us. You've got these limits on who's actually going to invest. Probably more family office. We're seeing lots of family office, high net worth and angels getting involved, which is great to see. And it's kind of interesting that I'm seeing that more and more, that's where people are finding those funds. But what we're coming back to and what we're seeing repeatedly is a lot of these companies that are they're actually out there selling purpose so hard that sometimes they're missing the fact that they've actually got to build a really good commercial proposition. And so a lot of the work we're finding we're doing now, and this has sort of been over the last 3, 4, 5 months, is really drilling into how do we help those companies develop a model that really articulates commercial value and impact. How do we bring those two together so that if you go out to a traditional investor who might be saying your metrics don't look like what I want to see right now, but we can help them show that over time this is actually a really compelling proposition, that gets interesting. So we're seeing more and more demand for that. We obviously see a lot of demand for non-dilutive funding at the moment because that's where these companies are finding their funding. So a lot of the grants switched off for a while, but there's things coming back on, and our team do a lot of work really helping these founders understand where are the relevant funds for them, and a lot of the funding that's coming through in grants is relevant to this sector. But certainly the thing that we're seeing is that need to differentiate, that need to show the saving the world is amazing. That's what we all want to see. But what investors need to see is that you are a good business who is also saving the world, as opposed to you saving the world and I'm building a business at the same time. So I think that's the shift that I'm seeing is really needed, is making sure that founders really understand they've got to have that compelling commercial proposition.
Was that your experience, Jada? Was it it's a really great business that happens to be climate positive, or was there an emotional, rational conversation, different levels?
Yeah, it kind of goes on a few different levels, and I think it's becoming easier and easier to become a more commercial climate tech business as the world changes and recognises that this is very much intertwined. So I think it's getting easier and easier to kind of match profit and purpose together. But I mean, originally what we had was very much, purpose driven in terms of what we wanted, and realised that as we were developing the business proposition, that it's not just a solution that we think is good for the planet, but also it's actually now a problem for businesses. And, for context, for people who don't understand what we do, we're helping businesses measure and manage their impact on biodiversity. So from the onset, most businesses think, well, that's just like a nice to have if I have the extra cash and time to sort of spend on this. But we're seeing that, first of all, that, biodiversity and resources associated with nature are finite, and most businesses, in fact, 45 trillion, I think is the number, of economic growth is dependent on biodiversity. So there's that big picture, but there's also the driving forces that are now happening on an international scale. So, for example, like the TCFD, the Task Force for Climate-related, but also nature-related financial disclosures. These are now problems for businesses. They are drains for time and energy when it comes to reporting, when it comes to ESG frameworks within a business. And so the question is now that if these businesses have to do this anyway, how can we make this as easy as possible? And that's sort of the train that we've jumped on, and means that we can tie our purpose also with profit, because it's an easy sell. We can make this process as quick and easy as possible, whilst also making it as meaningful as possible in terms of impact on nature. So I think there's a lot of businesses that are coming out in similar ways and finding that there's processes and now that sort of coming into businesses that they have to think about. One, whether because it's compliance, but also maybe because of efficiency, and how can we make that process easy, but also in line with bigger goals for what climate and nature need to be looking like as well. So I think there's kind of that piece of, you have to think about a commercial business, and particularly in the context of Xylo, we know that we can't have a big impact unless we're also a really successful business. You have to sort of really intertwine those two things, but the method for how depends on your solution and how you sort of interact with businesses and users as well. So that's the piece I think that a lot of founders need support on. How do I interlink those is there force already there that I can sort of jump on and make that process as easy as possible? Or is it something that we need to rethink in terms of where we fit in how business thinks about things like climate and nature?
I was just going to say to that point, Jada, like it's interesting that I think often when somebody's building a business for impact, for purpose, that they really want to go out and do something good, there's almost a reluctance to really try and charge, but to really understand the value of what they're delivering, because they feel like they're doing good. And sometimes I think what happens is people don't actually they don't recognize the value or the amount of customers, potential customers out there, because of this sort of changing nature of the corporates need to, meet their ESG obligations and various, targets that they've got in place. So I think there's this piece as well about understanding the value of what you can deliver to support those other companies out there, and trying to figure out the way that you can charge well for it and appropriately as you grow, but that getting the customer and finding that positioning is really key, as opposed to they're doing me a favor if I go and if they're willing to work with me. I think that's a really important sort of tipping point.
One of the things I'd chuck into the conversation is that demand is really coming into resolution. Jodie talk about corporate, the momentum for corporate action is just a tidal wave, and we can reflect back on other waves of industrial change, introduction of mobile technologies, or even the evolution of the internet, and organizations respond to it, and that response creates demand. And just over the course of the this year to last year, between the report, the release of the reports, and then you're back a few years prior to that, like the amount of appetite within spending pools, customers, I think is just at the beginning of building that sort of tidal wave of sort of opportunity. So that to me is the art is then to work out customer profile, where's the wallet, how do I penetrate through to that, classic selling of what's available, but the underlying demand, particularly from the corporate sector and government sector as well. There's a lot of commitments being made, by governments at all levels. Feels to me like a real underpinning of opportunity that maybe was less available in prior years.
And I think there's urgency around that now, Malcolm. Like it's interesting that everyone's got these targets, and those targets are getting closer and closer. So it feels like there's more urgency, certainly in the corporate world, whether you're a climate denier, whoever you are, it doesn't matter, because now you've got these targets. You actually have to get in and take action. And so I'm actually loving the momentum that you can see coming with that, with these organisations saying now, how do I sort out my supply chain, or how do I sort this out? So it's now just it's their job to find these solutions. So I've seen some really interesting stories about corporates kind of saying, we've got 30 things to solve now. How do we get in and find all the ways we're going to solve them? And it's going to come from innovators. It's going to come from really interesting businesses out there that are thinking differently.
Absolutely. And I think also on that, previously the momentum had to come from sustainability teams within a company, where now we're seeing this top-down approach, which is pushing things through so much faster. And it means that it's company-wide as well, that every single process needs to have these considerations in mind. And that means that things are moving so much faster.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I think they're growing, obviously, the sustainability teams, but it also touches all parts, right? It's the logistics team. We've got to think about how they do transport, and then it's the energy, who's doing the power purchase agreement for the company. Like, there are so many different parts of an organization, and I don't think that the sustainability team has the power, right? If you compare it to the legal team or the accounting team in these big companies, it definitely does have the base. I think the other thing I've never seen in all the disruptions I've seen coming, I've never seen the incumbents participate so deeply, so early. There is an opportunity for investment there, and Joel asked the question about corporate VC. I'm wary of that. Like, I think you're right, Kyle. I think it's really positive, but some corporate VCs, like the strategy of them, like if it's too early, it can be concerning. At least they're looking at them as customers is great, them as investors could be great, them as both could be complex. Jada, have you any comments on that?
Yeah, I'd like to have a quick reaction, because it's There's a lot of parallels to the health and life sciences industry where the corporate sector has actually moved down that IP curve quite successfully over, let's call it 3 or 4 decades. And they're really at times capital intensive models. And that parallel to our field, or sometimes capital intensive, sometimes it is the big incumbent is the customer. So seeing that activity in the innovation space is totally agree. You've got to sort of balance out interests, but I think there's a thoughtful approach to be applied that ultimately that might be a channel to market that you need. You might think of a drug discovery organization, life sciences, healthcare, which ultimately those distribution chains that big pharma offer is really a way to get a solution into the hands of a needy consumer much faster and more broadly. So it's a really interesting conundrum. The strategic trade-offs between having a shareholder who may want to take you in a particular direction, being that corporate, that's the point you're talking to. And I think that's always the art as to how do you sort of engage, seek. The good thing about I think many strategics, they're looking for the sort of biggest bang for the smallest buck. And so if you potentially have a strategic relationship which wants to be on the share register, but you can contain it to a very small, lower influential role position, then that might be the ideal. And we do see that.
And to that point, what's really interesting is the amount of founders we speak to in this sector who are really clear that they're going to be selective about the investors they want to work with. So I think generally speaking, through the years, many years that I've been watching this, a founder would sort of say, if I can get the cash, I will get cash where I can get it, and I will run with that. And what I find interesting is that that focus on purpose, that focus on the desire to build a really solid, sustainable business that can last, and that can be built in a fashion that founders want to see that business operate. There's a really big push that I'm seeing with people saying, I want to be selective. And I don't know what happens when you get to the point that you say, I can't get my pick of investors, but there's much more focus on that selection process as opposed to just go out and do the rounds and get the money where you can. And I'm finding that really, it's not unexpected, but I'm finding it really interesting.
Yeah, I think we're sort of the manifestation of that in that we, don't have huge options in terms of where we get capital, but the capital that we are getting offered, we are very selective with because there is lots of different routes to market for solutions, particularly in data in the biosphere, because they are such new markets for this. So there is routes for corporate VC, and I definitely think there's a place for them in some strategies, but not necessarily all. I wouldn't say all money is going to be, the same and as effective as you want, depending on your, ambitions for scale, particularly across markets and industries as well. Our strategy has been sort of picking one industry and then growing from there. And so going with one corporate that might fit that industry won't make sense if we do want to jump across multiple industries as well. So it really does depend on what the goal is. But certainly for us, we're very sort of thoughtful in how we consider that kind of funding.
I think it goes to another complexity, I think, which is we're Australian climate tech companies building global solutions. You've got multiple fast-moving regulation changes around the world. I think to Nick's point around companies, not startups, it's a lot of these companies aren't just SaaS or not many of them e-commerce at all. Doing hardware that has actually a manufacturing component, which you can't just make 1 million units in Shenzhen and send them around the world. Like there is and the regulations changing so quickly. Like just even thinking in ahead for carbon border adjustment mechanism, like the free trade agreement with the USA and Inflation Reduction Act, like processing locally. Like there's so much complexity to that. I think it means partnerships with smart people with companies of different sizes can add a ton of value, but you've still got this power balance, which it adds complexity. Like it's just another complexity layer in an already challenged market. But how is everyone else seeing that in terms of like the Build for Australia, Go Globally amongst that changing policy framework?
You go.
I was just going to say, I think that's kind of the strategy that we have taken, but also many sort of counterparts have, in terms of really trying to use Australia as a testing ground before going to these wider markets. For example, like I just got back from the UK a month ago just for some scoping, because we've got some huge legislation coming out that's very supportive of what we're doing over there. And it's a whole different ballgame in terms of being able to think about scaling to those kinds of markets from Australia. So I think you have to really feel stable in Australia and established before thinking about those markets, because in terms of resources being stretched thin, but also in terms of different compliance and regulation policies, they're a whole different market in that sense as well. So our approach has always been sort of really make sure that we're established in Australia before thinking about other markets.
And I think what we've probably seen is, like founders in Australia have always wanted to go global. Like it's natural, but we're a small market, and that's where the opportunity sits. But I think the success really comes when you actually have a good handle on what it is you're doing, and you have the capacity to scale. And there is a danger, I think, that people want to sort of jump and head to another region because they see that it's a larger population, they see a larger opportunity. But if you haven't really got a good handle on what you're doing here, it's going to be hard to make it work in a whole other region when you're trying to still operate here. So the complexity it adds to operating a business is huge. And in this sector, what we're seeing is a lot of people that come from science backgrounds, they come from other backgrounds. They're not coming really from a business background, because they're building really complex, difficult solutions. So you don't have people that have this natural, some do, but you don't necessarily have a big group of people who have a natural ability to build a business. So what we're seeing is that need for support is greater. And, the things that you guys are doing, Mick, with Climate Salad is great. Like, all the things that you do around helping understand how to build and scale a business. The things that we do are really about how to get the fundamental layer in the business to be able to grow. But the needs are greater. And I think sometimes without that understanding, it can be easy to think, let's just dive into the US, or let's just jump into another country because there's more people and there'll be more opportunity. But that can be a dangerous move as well if you're not ready.
I think it's always been a challenge in Australia, I think, getting that balance right. Malcolm, in terms of the what you're seeing in terms of we want local jobs, or we're solving climate problems, like I guess the focus on energy has felt closer to like advanced manufacturing maybe, or utility, so it's like for like replacement of jobs. But how are you seeing how groups like CSC see the local and global balance being forged?
Look, historically, we've been a big funder of projects, which has brought, technology onshore, whether it's, just to use easy examples, wind farms, we don't have much of a wind blade manufacturing industry in Australia. So there's sort of been a classic, Aussie consumer of tech, which, I think Australia's been a great consumer of tech over the years, from the enterprise down. I think the field we play in here, my team within CFC, but also, this entire audience is, thinking about, businesses which have, reached well beyond the shores of Australia. Now we're constrained, in the way we invest, in terms of Australian public money, invest in Australian opportunities, but we're not constrained to invest in things which have offshore growth opportunity. The jobs, sort of transition piece, we as a corporation, we have an ESG lens on everything we do, and we're always trying to sort of level that up. In fact, we're sort of working through what in fact framework looks like for our demand side of the business at the minute. So that's a sort of leveling up of our capabilities within those frameworks. Just transition naturally forms a very big part of our thinking, but we also then look to the nature of the projects we're working in, and if they can't meet our ESG filters, then it's going to be hard for us to support them. Overall, we are investing for transition. So we're taking a finance lens to growing projects and opportunities which decarbonize the economy. The good news is that generates more jobs almost as a byproduct, by and large. We're not necessarily in the business of investing to create jobs. We see that as a fantastic outcome and supports the just transition I just touched on.
And easy. lots to do. Yeah, thanks for the comments there. Just someone asked a question around whether the CFC support the ecosystem. I think it's one of the really interesting things to think about. Certainly, CFC supported the industry report of Climate Salad. I think there is a question around where do you invest for the biggest impacts, and because it's so broad across so many industries, there is a challenge between, do you take the Saul Griffith approach of actually just taking things that already work and having more of them? Is that going to take you far enough? Should we invest in really early stage research to try to build moonshots? Do we do something in the middle? I'm getting that balance right. I think is challenging. But look, honestly, certainly Climate Salad can't do what High Growth Ventures and CFC does. Certainly not what Jada does at Xylo. So I think it does take that village to really support it all at all levels. So I think that that ecosystem building is happening. And I think it's the one thing to note as well is I think we're clearly building on top of a quite successful tech industry. It's not as big as Silicon Valley or Israel, but it's certainly bigger than it was 10 years ago. And we've got more success stories, more VCs. We've got people understanding what ESOPs are. Like, I think all of that genuinely helps. And it helps, especially since we're bringing in a lot of science and research based entrepreneurs, and they're coming into this space, but at least they're coming into some strength. So yeah, progress is being made. Team, can you get your thoughts in terms of that point around where are some of the areas which we may not be thinking about, which if we support them, we could see the good long-term growth of the ecosystem?
I mean, one of the things that's cropping up that I find really interesting is like this sort of the rise in angel investing, the rise in people kind of saying, I really care about making a difference. And probably some conversations with people in this sector who are saying that's where they're going to start looking, but also some of the angel groups saying, we think we can make a difference here. Like, it feels like there's a potential shift coming in some ways in terms of investment, because I'm not seeing founders lining up to VC because they're just not. They're going to some VC, but they're being choosy about where they go. So they're thinking really carefully about where they go. But it feels like there's going to be a sort of a mix in the change in the way the funding piece operates. But I'm also fascinated by the fact that we're dealing with founders who have no interest in going out and being cowboys. Like, they want to go out and build a really good business that will do really good things, and they want to do it well. And you've also got to balance that when you're an early stage business, because there's only so much that you can really get right, right at the beginning. But that piece about really wanting to have good governance, really wanting to look after their people. So living the values, of this sort of sector is really interesting to me. That I'm loving that. I'm loving that people are trying to sort of build something that is sustainable and long term.
Yeah, I second that. I think particularly thinking about those routes to financing, as we have this influx of early stage companies in the last few years, it's the question of how can we get funding as quickly as possible to get traction as quickly as possible? How can we test these ideas? Because particularly for those more complex scientific kind of solutions, they need testing, and quite a lot of testing, like years and years of testing, and they need to get off the ground as quickly as possible. So I think that's why angel investors have been a great solution to that. It's sort of saves that time of going to VCs, because that is a very time-intensive process to get significant capital via VCs. So that's been a great route. I think the other piece as well is that increase in investment to founders that already exist, but also opportunities for new founders testing new ideas, and making that platform as easy as possible. So I think, community-led initiatives like Climate Salad, sort of, networking opportunities, but also, the StartMate Climate Fellowship, those kinds of initiatives are really fantastic. One, for hiring for early stage investors, but also bringing people with fantastic skills from other industries into climate tech. And I think that's what we need to invest in more. How can we bring more and more talent into climate tech to make sure that these ideas have the resources that they need to scale as well? If we have an idea that has traction, what do we do from there, and who can we bring in to help us do that? So I think it's kind of that two-way street of investment and testing ideas, but then also having the rocket fuel to help us, grow that idea once we've got some traction for it.
That's a good segue to my area where we could all invest, which is making our space that barbecue conversation. Over my working time, I've been delighted to see the idea of a startup become a topic of conversation broadly held across the community, the country, and you see the language permeating all sorts of settings where you would never imagine a leader of a government department talk about part of their unit being a startup, or sitting on a director's course and Australian Institute company directors talk about, hey, we're doing this, part of what we do is it's really like a startup. So the language is permeated, and I think an area where we can all invest is sort of moving that frontier of familiarity and association with what we're trying to do here. There's a massive obviously grassroots support for change. I think there's a really strong community visibility about the issue, and then our sector, which is bringing solutions through. It feels like there's a ready audience, and if we look back at what's worked to make the concept of a startup popular and exciting and topic to aspire towards over the last decade, that's one of the great areas I think we can invest as a community to do the same for climate tech in particular.
And I think further to that, Malcolm, I mean, the idea of the startup used to be the sort of like the cool and like cool people and hanging out and this great lifestyle that came with the business as opposed to the business. I think what's exciting now is these are really, really exciting businesses. I mean, when I talk to people sort of in my world, outside of work, about the kind of things that these companies are doing, people are just like mind blown all the time, because they kind of don't realize this stuff's happening, and people get really, really excited about it. And it's kind of where I wonder how much you could push the angel investing angle for that early stage, because people are genuinely excited to know this stuff is going on, like that people are out there building solutions and driving change and making a difference. So that's what feels exciting to me. Like, when you start talking to people, I mean, I talk about GoTerra all the time because I love talking about the maggot lady. I talk about what you guys do, Jada, with Xylo. Like, it's kind of people actually doing stuff that is making a difference to the world. It does excite people. And I think we can push that a lot and really help more and more people understand it outside of the little world, the bubble that we're all in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really have to manage my energy levels on that, because and you've got to watch where you stray into, because I just don't read any comments of the public comments of people that are like, oh yeah, the world's always weather's been changing, and it is really and I agree. I think there's a massive negative bubble, and it's probably bigger than we think. There's a strong bubble of the climate committed, like people on this call who are like already doing stuff, and I agree. Like the reason why we do our climate tech festivals is to get people coming along. It's like, I have no idea about this stuff, no idea. Wow, our whole goal is eye opening. Like it doesn't take much. You just tell them these stories. So, but I agree. I think we want to get them out there and have them real. And I think again, Australia's got this weird dynamic of world's highest penetration of rooftop solar, lowest penetration of EVs, like a negative national narrative now becoming positive. Like I think this is a critical year actually in telling that story and getting out there. And look, it's the whole reason we do the industry report is to show that we're not talking about a potential industry here that one day might be useful. It's like, this is a strong industry today, and if you support it, we'll have a great research and innovation sector, we'll have lots of local jobs, we'll bring in lots of capital, and we'll solve climate problems. Like and it's incredibly diverse too. It's like it just wins on all fronts. I might be considered slightly biased, but I think that the data is the data, so it's all really good. Look, thanks team. I know we've got some real, and I think Moben's asked a question around that, or comment around the fact that actually we've lost a lot of our manufacturing capabilities. We gave a lot of that up and sort of outsourced that, but there's been a reinvigoration, I think, of that. There's an opportunity to do that. And I don't think that is lost forever. I think we don't obviously want to have millions of people working in factories, but I think being smart and developing great technology and leading the way, I think is a real opportunity for us. So excellent. Well, that's I think that's plenty great panel team. Loved a lot of interaction. Is always my big goal. A good varied crew here. Yeah. You interacted with each other. That's my main goal of a good panel. Really encourage everyone to download the report and get into it, give us some feedback. It's not the answer to all of our problems, but it just gives us a bit more information around the things where we can target and do our good work. But I think to Malcolm's point as well is, if you can share that with other people and show that there is a real industry here to support, then just joining Climate Salad, coming to an event, meeting one of the companies, there's lots I think it's a lot more accessible than people think. I think they may have a view that there is not one, or that they're not a chemist or a physicist or a biologist. But we need, as I joked down in Melbourne, we need all sorts of people in climate tech of all skill sets to be active now. So a huge thanks to Olivia and Marielle, who led the whole project. So thank you for that. Our big thanks to Tech Central for being massive supporters, CSC, KPMG, and also the many Jadas running these incredible companies. Actually, the Coalface. Well, we did it better than Coalface. What's it at the Mushroom Face, solving these problems. So thanks to our panelists, Kylie, Malcolm, and Jada. I really appreciate that. And again, I hope to see everybody at an event or in a webinar soon. Back to you, Olivia.
If you want to check out the industry report, we have popped that link in the chat. Otherwise, you can contact Mick or myself at any time with any further questions or feedback. We absolutely love to learn how you use the report. And at the end of the day, the whole reason we do this report is to increase the collaboration between all of the different people in our wonderful climate tech ecosystem. With the full goal of helping climate tech founders grow. That's how we're going to create the big climate impact. So any questions, please let me know. And thank you so much for coming along to the call today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.